Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About Houses. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Really quick before we get started, we call the show Talk About Houses. Mm-hmm. And Juana, why do we call it? It used to be Todd Miller TV.
Yes.
But why do we call it Talk About Houses?
So many moons ago, we had a radio show called Talk About Houses. So we just thought that we would name the video blog Talk About Houses as well.
Yeah, so it was 16 years ago, actually, we were doing the radio. It was live talk radio here in Las Vegas. So we still have the domain name talkabouthouses.com. Matter of fact, if you just go talkabouthouses.com, it brings you right to the YouTube page. Okay, so this video is the 10 worst housing markets in the U.S. They're all unique. Mm-hmm. They all have their own reason why they're the worst. We're gonna go through them here and talk about them in a little bit of detail. Okay, Toledo, Ohio is number one. Mm-hmm. Median listing price right now is $115. Now this is based on list price. Okay, median list price change down 18%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Juana, what happened in Toledo in 2019?
So they had a car plant go in there. And so there was this rapid escalation in prices because you had an influx of people coming in. And then once everybody came in, got settled, the market's just kind of adjusting back to normal. Yeah,
so that's kind of, you see this in the Midwest, in cities like that where it's heavy manufacturing. There's those ghost towns in West Virginia where they used to mine stuff and now there's nothing there. And a lot of times people have just left, like the town is there, but there's nobody that lives there. So Toledo's kind of, it was really dependent on manufacturing. They had a manufacturer leave in like 2008, and it really wrecked the economy there locally. Mm-hmm. But they reopened a plant, and so it's doing better, but still down 18%. Mm-hmm. So if you bought like in 2019 or 2020, it's probably top of the market.
Right, but remember, this is based on list price. And the list price is nothing more than an invitation to make an offer. So that's not necessarily reflective of what prices homes are actually selling for. Okay,
the next one is one of those markets where everybody left and flooded there during the pandemic, but they're slowly filtering their way out. This is Rochester, New York. Mm-hmm. Median list price of $150,000. But the price change year over year is 17% down. Mm-hmm. So how does that work, Juana? What happened there? I mean, this is only an hour outside of New York City, really.
Same kind of thing. People decided that they can, since they can work remotely, they can go somewhere else, live somewhere else, and still maybe work at some place in Rochester.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, people that fled a lot of times said, "Oh, I like it here, but let me try some other place," and they kept going.
Right. So, I think Rochester is kind of an interesting one because there's some a pretty heavy medical presence there. So I kind of wonder what role that plays into it. If you are more familiar with Rochester than we are, and that's very possible, drop us a note in the comment and tell us, what exactly is the skinny in there.
And it's a college town too.
Yes.
Some universities there.
Yes.
Detroit is number 3. Mm-hmm. $75,000 is the listing price. Mm-hmm. Median down 15%. So now remember, when you get smaller dollar amounts, mm-hmm. doesn't take a big change to have a big percentage swing, right?
Right. So look, Detroit has been struggling forever and a day. So this is not unforeseen for Detroit. And like Todd said, because we're dealing with smaller dollar amounts, it just makes a bigger impact percentage-wise. So it sounds maybe worse than it really is.
This city goes in the column of people leaving, mm-hmm. basically leaving. Pittsburgh.
Yes.
230,000 is the median, it's down 13%, mm-hmm. which is a lot. That means it was like 260
right.
a year ago. Now it's 230. Mm-hmm. So not a lot. And, Pittsburgh's another decent size mm-hmm. City. It's the largest city in Western Pennsylvania. And it's, but it's kind of there's not a lot of growth there. People are leaving.
Right.
Young people are leaving.
Right. So Pittsburgh is suffering from a couple things. One, people are leaving because they're just leaving Pittsburgh in general. And two, again, with the opportunity to work remotely, people are choosing to go live where their quality of life is better, but maybe still continue their employment in Pittsburgh remotely.
Yeah. The next one is another one of those pandemic ones. The people went there and then they left. Springfield, Massachusetts, like an hour out of Boston.
Right. So this is kind of like Todd said, it has to kind of do with what's going on in the Northeast. There is this whole reshuffling in the Northeast, and this is one of those places that's getting reshuffled. People left Boston, they went somewhere like Springfield, and then decided that maybe it wasn't what they had in mind, and they're exiting again.
Okay, the next one we talk about, we mention on the blog every once in a while, we give an example of when we say not San Francisco, but like not a cheap city, but a really, really inexpensive city, Tulsa. Okay?
Yeah.
Tulsa did well a long time ago, oil and gas, but today not so much. Median list price $220 down about 5%. This is an interesting one because even though the homes are relatively cheap, they're very large, and the new trend is smaller homes. So how does that work? How does a smaller home affect the median prices?
So it's kind of a weird thing. So you've got a smaller home, and maybe the dollar per square foot is actually higher, but because of we're looking at simply home prices in general, that could actually make it look like there's a decrease percentage-wise in the list price of homes, but that's possibly because these are smaller homes. So dollar per square foot may be higher, but the overall price, as far as generically across the board, lower.
Yeah, so if you have a market where you have $100,000, $115,000 to $200,000 house, the median's $150,000. But let's say that somebody builds $200,000 homes. The median's now $100,000 because you have 300s, a 150, a 200. The middle number's 100, right? Because you throw out the high 2 and the low 2, so it's 100. So it looks like the market tanked, but it didn't tank. What happened was they just built smaller homes, and and that's an extreme example, right? But that when you get to a market where they build smaller homes, it affects the median.
Right.
Number 7, this is an interesting one, Los Angeles. This is the only actual major city that had a decline.
Right. So Los Angeles has been experiencing a population exodus, and so that has a lot to do with it. I think if you know people in California, then you know that they have had a good number of their neighbors leave for states like Nevada or Texas or Arizona, and Los Angeles is definitely part of that. In particular, because Los Angeles has challenges between their prices for real estate in the first place, the traffic jams, employment. There are all kinds of challenges going on there. So people have left. So to a large extent, Los Angeles has suffered from that. So we're talking about higher inventory, and that's placed some downward pressure on the prices. And
like Los Angeles, like a lot of markets, it depends on where you are. Different parts of that are in high demand with multiple offers, and then other parts are pretty bad.
So remember, we always talk about this, real estate is hyper-local, and we're making very broad generalizations about these metropolitan areas, and clearly there are areas within these metropolitan areas that are thriving, and there are multiple offers, and people are getting more than their asking price for the homes, but we're just using kind of a broad stroke as we're looking at the market.
This next one is the example of people leaving the city center to go live in suburbs. Memphis, Tennessee, median price is $173,500, down about 5%.
Right. Memphis, great place, and it's just getting a little bit reshuffled right now. Yeah,
and which isn't bad, but it doesn't take a lot of people to, because that's how cities work. You either move in or you're moving out. They And Memphis is, it's not a city where it has a massive banking or anything in the city. It's just a population base. So as the demographics change, as people start having kids or whatever, they decide, hey, we don't want to live in a city. We maybe want to go live in suburbs, or maybe builders are building new homes in the suburbs, or it's just better to live out there for whatever reason. Low crime, who knows. The next one, Chicago. Now, we said that Los Angeles was the only major city, but that's actually not true, Chicago. But here's the interesting thing. Los Angeles, the median price was about $1 million. It was $985,000, right? This is $400,000. Now that's super cheap. I can't think of any major U.S. city where a median anything is $400,000.
Right. So Chicago is kind of an interesting duck. What they have on the market is about 6,000 condos, high-rise units, in town that are on the market. Now, I don't know what the whole inventory pool would be, meaning I don't know if there are, for example, 30,000 units and out of those 6,000 are on the market, or if there are 80,000 units and out of those 6,000 are on the market. So I don't know what that number is. If you are from Chicago and you are in real estate, please straighten me out. How many units are we talking as far as how many units would be available if everything went on the market versus the 6,000 that are on the market? Is this a lot? I mean, 6,000 to us sounds like a lot on the market, but I don't know. I don't have a good perspective. So I would love to know more about that if your market is Chicago.
Chicago has two interesting things. It has a train system into the city. So a lot of people live out in the suburbs. So there's not a huge, you have to live in the city. And you get that in cities like New York where they have a really good train system.
Right, and I also wonder if part of this trend is that Chicago had an influx of younger people, and then they matured, coupled up, and are starting families, and that's why they're moving out of the high rises, out of these condos into regular homes, maybe out in the suburbs and that sort of thing. Is that playing a role in this? I don't know, but I would love to know. So please give me some information on Chicago. Chicago is one of my favorite cities. I happen to love the architectural river cruise and the architecture in general in Chicago. So I'm very fond of it. So anything that I can learn, I am grateful for. Thank you.
Put in perspective, the 6,000 houses or condos on the market. Miami had way more than that.
Right.
Way more than that. Tens of thousands of condos on the market that were selling for about. You could buy a condo for $80,000, a high-rise condo for $80,000, and that condo today is probably $400,000.
Right. So we're not suggesting that the condos in Chicago are depressed in any way as far as price-wise. We're just wondering, 6,000 units on the market is a lot. It's a big number. So we're just wondering, how does that actually play out in that market?
Yeah. And then number 10 is kind of one of those medium city, Richmond, Virginia, right? Median price 310, down 3.4%. But this is another one of they're building smaller houses.
They are. And Richmond, Virginia is kind of a funny duck. For us on the West Coast, we tend to price homes at or above market value and then kind of negotiate from there. Richmond, Virginia, that's not the way these folks do it there. These folks do it a little more conservatively. So if your home is worth, let's say, $500,000, then maybe you might price it at $475,000 and then let the market figure it out with multiple offers or however they want to deal with it. So it's a different strategy. So that's part of the reason why we're looking at a lesser list price with them, because part of it has to do with the way their market works. And remember, these are list prices, not sale prices.
Okay, so these numbers came from the National Association of Realtors. They grabbed them out of Realtor.com, which is basically the MLS. They just use the MLS data, but they have access to it because it came from the Realtor Association. So, it is interesting to see markets that are not all going up like crazy.
Right.
And we do note that there's markets that are not screaming, up 20% every year like Vegas and Miami and places like that.
Right. So, look, it's a big country. There are lots of different markets, lots of things going on in everybody's community, and all of that impacts real estate, right? It matters what employment is like. It matters what the local government is doing. All kinds of things matter, and that shows up in the prices of homes.
Yeah. So we wanted to kind of go over this. Maybe in a year it'll look different. Maybe we'll actually have some sale price data that shows the market in decline. Obviously places like Detroit or Toledo, places like that where it's not a ton of people moving there, they tend to have, and I'll put the map up of the whole country. You can see where the 10 are located to give you perspective. But 7 of them actually are all in one area. They're all basically in that one area, the Northeast. And if you know anything about demographics, what that means, where people are moving from, is they're moving from those states and they're moving west and south. That's the sort of the natural trend, and it's been that way for years now. People move south to Florida, to Texas, to even southern states, the Carolinas, and they move to Colorado. Sometimes they just get to Tennessee and stop. Sometimes they make it all the way to the West Coast, Arizona, Nevada, California, and those states.
Some of these numbers to me are interesting because we do work with investors, and investors right now are bemoaning the prices here in Las Vegas and in other Western states. And then when you look at some of these prices in the Northeast, someplace like Rochester, and you're thinking, well, I can get a house for so much less, and I wonder what it would rent for. If I have to have a property manager anyway, what difference does it make whether I'm purchasing in Las Vegas or in Rochester? And that might be something to keep in mind if you're an investor, maybe diversifying their portfolio so that you're not all in one place. Just something to ponder.
Yeah, and the only risk about buying a rental in a declining market or a market where people are leaving is that the demand for housing is less. So sometimes you have to either price it lower, or you have to have vacancy time, while you're waiting to get a tenant. Popular places have always been Arizona, Nevada, Texas, California, Georgia, for rental houses because they're relatively, inexpensive and pretty good. People moving there, so there's always a pretty good demand for rent. Obviously, Vegas, the only thing keeping Vegas kind of going is rents have gone up.
Right.
Because if rents hadn't gone up, it would be a not attractive market to come by in. And remember, this is what's interesting. We talk about, every time we do the video, we talk about the housing market. But the last run up, when the prices went up 50%, median rents went from $1,200 to $1,300. That was it. So that investors weren't, and the problem is there were a lot of units being built. So it was a downward pressure on rents because there was so much stuff being built, and that's not happening now. There's not a lot of stuff being built, but there's still people coming here. So what's happening is that it's just pushing up rent on existing places. So rents are up 22%, I think, year over year.
Right.
And everything's up more than the 12. I think we went from 1,200 to 1,800 or 1,900. So and when the market tanked, the rents only dropped to 1,150, I think. So it was 1,200, market shot up, 1,300, market collapsed, 1,150. So there was still pretty good rental market. The interesting thing though there we had was vacant houses. So they weren't eligible to be rentals. So we still didn't have 5,000 houses just sitting there with no renter because they couldn't be occupied for whatever reason.
Right. So real estate, always interesting. Hope you liked this video. It was something a little bit different for us to go over, and something that I think interests a lot of us is how is it different in other markets. So if you like the video, please hit the like button, hit the notification bell, leave us comments, whatever expertise you have in whatever market. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.